Great, thank you very much. We are going to start this afternoon's session. And before I begin, I want to say a couple of things. This room has very poor acoustics. It's hard to sometimes hear. So I will really appreciate during the presentation as well as afterwards when we do question answers, if we can stay as quiet as possible so the audience and the speaker can hear the conversation clearly to answer any questions that will arise after the presentation. Before I introduce myself, I also wanted to say thank you to MIRA staff for organizing this wonderful event. Room is almost full. And I wouldn't mind if all our staff stand up wherever they are. Ina, Audrey, Jazine, Allison, thank you very much for your hard work and keeping this event and organizing Caterina's travel to Hamilton. I am Parminder Raina. I am the Scientific Director of the McMaster Institute for Research on Aging, or with affection we call it MIRA for short. It is my pleasure to welcome everyone to our second annual Suzanne Labarge Lecture in Aging. Our event today takes place on the traditional territory shared between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and the Anishinaabe nations. This territory is covered by Upper Canada treaties, is within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement, and is directly adjacent to Haldimand Treaty territory. The Dish with One Spoon Wampum uses a symbolism of a dish to represent the territory and one spoon to represent that the people are to share the resources of the land and only take what they need. We must acknowledge a debt to those who are here before us and recognize our responsibility as guests to respect and honor the intimate relationship Indigenous peoples have to this land. So, today's event is hosted by MIRA as part of our work to optimize the health and longevity of Canada's aging population, not only Canada, but the global population. We do this through leading-edge research, education, community engagement, and knowledge mobilization. We have just celebrated 10 years of MIRA at McMaster, and each year since we formed, we have grown our impact. MIRA researchers are improving the experience of aging in many ways and across so many disciplines. We now have 213 members in our institutes from all 6 faculties and 51 different departments and schools at McMaster. And not only that, we engage across the community with all sorts of different groups of people to enrich the experience of our researchers and the dissemination and knowledge mobilization related to aging. Our researchers are looking at aging from digital inclusion to hip replacement, from stroke prevention to public transportation, from linguistics to vaccines and more. But I would like to take a moment to briefly highlight a few of the newest ways MIRA's work aligns with today's topic. A couple of years ago, through a generous gift from Suzanne Labarge, we started an aging brain program here at McMaster Institute for Research on Aging. And we have started several projects in that space, projects like ketone supplementation and cognitive health, looking cognitive and brain health across generations, and MindMove project. Many of you in this room might be the participants of MACM3, and we are trying to understand how mobility and brain health are linked. In addition to that, one of the other exciting projects we have, which is funded through external sources, is the Brain Health Resource and Integrated Diversity Hub. We call it BRAID. BRAID brings together in a single platform trusted, culturally aware information on brain health and dementia for the community as well as healthcare providers. We are working with partners and experts across the country to create this new resource, and this project is funded through the Government of Canada. The work of all MIRA's researchers is ambitious and it is hopeful. McMaster University's former Chancellor, Suzanne Labarge, who's sitting here in the front, and you will hear from her later in the session, is someone who believes in ambition and hope. Suzanne is a member of Order of Canada, former Vice Chair of Royal Bank of Canada, and a McMaster alumna. Thanks to Suzanne's early and continued support of MIRA, McMaster researchers are tackling these critical challenges in aging through interdisciplinary research and deep, meaningful engagement with our communities. Among much more, she has been foundational in building the McMaster Optimal Aging Portal, a free online resource that takes complex information about aging and presents it in an easy-to-understand language. The Labarge Center for Mobility and Aging and the MIRA Dixon Hall Center, a unique partnership between MIRA and Dixon Hall, a multi-service agency focused on addressing poverty, social injustice, and isolation across the lifespan in Toronto's downtown east. In 2024, Suzanne supported MIRA to build an existing research and develop new innovative programs around understanding aging brain and mobility impact over time. On behalf of McMaster and everyone in the MIRA research community, Suzanne, we thank you very much for all your generous gift and what you have done for the research community here at McMaster and community at large. So, to the main event. Before we get to today's presenter, I need to say that all this work is only possible because of many community members, and many of you are here today, who share their time, experience, and knowledge with us in this work. Much of the work we are doing wouldn't happen if many of you did not participate in the research we conduct here at MIRA. When you see a room this full of people from across the community, in fact, we had no more tickets to give away. We would love to have more people and more seats available. Unfortunately, this room only allowed us to host 240 people. It is clear that learning more about aging process is a priority for our community. Your participation today and the community eagerness to give time, expertise to research projects is a clear sign that McMaster University's success comes from aligning priorities such as aging research with what is meaningful to you. Thank you to all of the community members who make this work possible. Your commitment to aging research has real-world impact. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Dr. Caterina Rosano. And I've asked Caterina how should I pronounce her name, and she gave me exact pronunciation. I hope I'm doing the justice to your last name. Dr. Rosano is a physician, scientist, and professor of epidemiology and associate director of clinical translation for the Aging Institute at the University of Pittsburgh. She's professor director of population neuroscience of aging for the National Institutes of Health T32 program. Dr. Rosano is a recognized leader in the study of brain health, aging, and mobility. With over 200 peer-reviewed scientific publications, she has led and played key roles in many American, Canadian, and international studies. Her research focuses on mobility resilience in older age and understanding the neurobiological drivers of aging. By combining neuroscience with population-based research, her work sheds light on the relationship between unique experiences of individual people and how aging and brain conditions show up over time. This work on the brain mechanisms and pathways that supports resilience in healthy aging are particularly important as those resilience pathways may be modifiable. We are delighted to welcome Caterina here today to share her insights on connecting longevity with vitality and resilience. Caterina, over to you.
Thank you very much for this generous introduction and for your welcome hospitality. And I am as equally impressed by your hospitality as I am with the quality of the work that you're doing. Thank you. You can hear me well? Okay, great, perfect. I want to tell you today about this idea that I've been having. I call it CLeVR, connecting longevity with vitality and resilience. You may know the gentleman to your left. Yes, David Attenborough, turned 100 just last week, and he is in good company. About 750,000 older adults are centenarian in the whole world. The gentleman to your right may be less known to you, Marcus Valerius Corvus. He also lived to 100 in the 300 before Christ. And his older age had a completely different effect on the people who saw him. When he was in his 60s and early 70s, he was still fighting in battle. And his adversaries would flee at the sight of a man of this age. And the reason was that they had never seen a man of this age. Never seen a man of this age. In those days, individuals didn't live that late, and if they did, they certainly didn't have this magnificent strength. So I want you to think about that because, in fact, longevity and lifespan has increased over time, and it is destined to increase. The map at the bottom here shows that in about 30 years, the number of individuals older than 100 will be about 4 million. And I'm sure you were looking at whether Canada was in the map. It is in the map. Life expectancy increased from, if you look at the beginning of the start of this diagram here on your left, in the late 1700s, individuals lived up at about 30 years. And toward the end of this map here, you see that now life expectancy in many countries is at about 80 years. Let me make the last part of the graph a little bigger so you can see here. And let's look at the last 20 years. Between 2000 and 2023, life expectancy has continued to increase across many countries. If you want to look here at the Americas, it went from the early 70s to probably 75. So it is continuing to increase. What has not been increasing, though, in parallel, is health span. You can think about health span as the number of years that you live free from disability and dementia, free from a major health condition. In this report, the author showed that while life expectancy, this line up here, keeps increasing over time, health-adjusted life expectancy, so number of years lived without disability, also increases. But it does not increase as fast as life expectancy. And this is what scientists call the health span-lifespan gap. In other words, it used to be that individuals, say, died of stroke or heart attack. It's no longer the case, but we have not eradicated completely heart attack or stroke. Therefore, we live with the sequela of those conditions. And chronic diseases affect our late years of life. And this is what prompted the United Nations to state a famous statement that is also in all of your material. We have added years to life. It is time to add life to years. Just around the same time, the WHO issued a world report on aging and health. And I want to point out that we're talking here about 10 years ago. This idea that we really need to work on health span and not only on lifespan is fairly recent. I want to read to you the statement issued by the WHO because it's very meaningful to me and it will help you understand my work. Healthy aging is the process of developing and maintaining the functional ability that enables well-being in older age. The key words in this statement is maintaining functional ability. This is really my work. I particularly focus on mobility resilience. I was observing these two individuals walking on the beach a few months ago. You can see that the person on the left is tall and lean, and the person on the right is shorter and heavier. I watched these individuals walk up and down the beach for several laps, always at the same pace. And clearly, the person on the right was struggling a bit, and yet was able to keep pace. You could tell they were having a good time, also having a conversation. This is a definition of mobility resilience. So in the face of certain challenges, in this case, heavier weight and a shorter height, which makes it for shorter legs, you can maintain your functional ability and capacity. The challenge that I encountered when I wanted to study mobility resilience is that it's not easy to measure. So I first had to figure out how to measure and how to define resilience in a way that would be reliable and valid. That was a necessary first step before I could study the drivers of mobility resilience. And really where I wanted to go, and I'm sure that's what you're interested in as well, is understanding whether we can enhance it. Because I'm giving this talk here, I'm sure I don't need to tell you about the importance of mobility. It's an important vital sign. And Dr. Raina Bouchamp were spearheading this fantastic special issue on in aging on mobility and what makes for good mobility. So let me dive straight into how we define mobility resilience. We walk more slowly for a number of reasons. I just told you height is one, and heavy weight is another one, pain and vision and problems in your legs. All of these can compromise gait speed. So I wanted to look at all the individuals who had at least one of these impairments and yet could maintain fast gait. So we looked in an epidemiological study, we looked at 2,300 adults age 65 plus who had at least one of these locomotor risk factors or causes for slow gait. And we looked at their gait speed, and we found that as predicted and as expected, 80% walk slower, whereas 20%, 15% walk faster. We looked at specifically 1 meter per second because it's a good indicator of vitality. So this 15% here did not appear to be a rare occurrence, did not appear to be random. And in fact, that's what we call mobility resilience. So walking at a gait speed above 1 meter per second in the presence of at least one impairment. What's important to notice that we replicated these findings across different epidemiological cohorts to make sure that our measure of mobility resilience was valid. So the next step is to find the drivers of mobility resilience. And I can tell you up front, and you can guess, that what we found was that there is a brain signature of mobility resilience. Now, before I show you how this signature looks like, let me tell you why I looked at the brain. Like we just said, I could have looked at many other factors. I could have examined pain. Many of you here study pain. I could have looked at muscle strength. But I decided to look at the brain as a source of mobility resilience for several reasons. Some are scientific and some are personal. I'll tell you the scientific reasons first. First of all, the brain as a source of mobility resilience is very compelling, and that is because the brain undergoes remodeling with age, a kind of remodeling that it is continuous in time and space. In other words, at any given moment, something is changing in our brain somewhere, in some parts of our brain, including now. What I need you to know is that these changes are not constant in space and they're not constant in time. In other words, there are some parts of the brain that are changing during some times in our lives and other parts change later. I'm interested in 3 areas, and that's what I'll be telling you about the most. These areas are the basal ganglia, the sensory motor area, and the frontoparietal area. You don't need to remember the names, just that these three areas regulate three important processes and function: moving, making decisions, and motivation. And if you don't remember all three, I'll refer to them as the 3M. Another thing that is important to know is that these changes do not happen for everybody the same way. In fact, the process of brain aging is highly heterogeneous. It depends on a number of factors. So you see, we were presented with this challenge: how do you study something that is so dynamic and it changes constantly and it changes continuously? And how do we account for all the other changes that could influence brain aging? And that's how population neuroscience started. It's a program that brings together the study of population health, which allows us to capture patterns in human heterogeneity, and the neuroscience, a discipline that virtually dissects the brain. Another reason why I looked at the brain is because imaging the brain is one of the coolest things I've ever done. It is also extremely challenging because you want to minimize the burden, the time that you spend inside the scanner, for example. It has to be as short as possible when you study individuals with older than 70. But the way, the virtual dissection of the brain is phenomenal. And I don't know about you, but some of these are actually hanging on the walls as decoration pieces because it's absolutely beautiful to look at the brain. Some of the things that I'll tell you today have to do with dopaminergic neurotransmission and connections that connect different parts of the brain. We have also studied task-related brain activation and small veins and the hippocampus and how much oxygen the brain consumes. So I told you there was a personal reason why I thought to look inside the brain. And like all good Italians, this reason has to do with my mother. We love to talk about our mothers. This is a picture from about 12 years ago. My mother had just started to experience a musculoskeletal pain due to a fall, and her walking had become slower. She started doing this cruising in the house where she was using furniture to support herself. She started stooping, she started a little bit of shuffling, and that's what she would do on just about on a regular day. However, on the day when she was with her granddaughter, or when someone was visiting, she stopped stooping and she had a pep in her step, and that's how she looked like. Nothing had changed except that she was walking differently. So I thought, okay, this kind of resilience, it is a mobility resilience, right? Because her gait speed, in fact, had changed. It had nothing to do with the locomotor impairment. Their pain was still there. It must have to do with something else. And I thought it must have to do with one of those 3Ms. Perhaps her making decisions is influenced. Her motivation, perhaps, has changed. And that's why I decided to spend so much time looking at brain as a driver of mobility resilience. So what did we find? We asked participants to walk as fast as they could. I don't know if you can see clearly on the slide. Individuals were wearing a headband, and they were also wearing a little waistband. And they also wore something on the wrist that some of you participating in some of these studies may have experienced. The headband is something that measures how much brain oxygenation is going on as people were walking. And the gait speed is measured by this waistband. So we ask people to walk as fast as you can. Now, if you're asked to walk as fast as you can, and we can do it later if you want, your attention, you need to pay more attention as you walk, right? I see lots of people nodding. Well, individuals with lower dopamine could not walk as fast as individuals with higher dopamine. So there was a difference in gait speed that was attributed in our studies to dopamine. It wasn't height, it wasn't BMI, it wasn't pain, age, or gender, or any of the other cardiovascular or cardiometabolic conditions or neurological conditions that you might think would affect gait speed. Dopamine was the only difference between these two groups. And this is how it actually would look like if you, If you see this, the person on the left, you see those blue areas indicate the level of radioligand that is indicates levels of dopamine. And you want brighter colors to indicate greater levels of dopamine. And right here, we're in one of those areas, the basal ganglia, that, as I told you earlier, is so important for all those three M's, moving, making decisions, and motivation. And what was even more surprising is that individuals, in this particular instance, this woman is an 80-year-old woman and is younger and yet has lower dopamine than this other individual. So this is to make the case it really wasn't driven by older age. In another task, we ask adults to walk on uneven surface. And similarly, when you walk on an uneven surface, you have to pay attention, yes? And you probably also have to slow down because you're paying attention. Now, let me tell you something. You're not supposed to be paying attention when you walk. That is not what we use this part of the brain for. We shouldn't be using this part of the brain to pay attention to where we put our feet. That's a predictor of falls, in fact. So this is an indicator of future fall risk, slowing down when walking on uneven surfaces. Again, similar to what we found in the previous study, we're finding that individuals with lower dopamine were the slowest of all, and individuals with more dopamine were the fastest of all. In another study, we asked individuals to walk and talk at the same time. And again, how many of you have a good conversation while you're walking with your peers, right? Same thing. You tend to slow down, and it requires a lot more attention. So in this case, we looked at the blood flow and through the prefrontal lobes, so the parts of the brain that is important, in fact, for attention, among other things. And we found that individuals with higher dopamine were those who walk faster, and they also needed less attention. Now, this is a super important thing, because you may be thinking, well, but it's good if I pay more attention. But as I told you earlier, you really want to save the frontal lobes to do other things. For example, to monitor the street. For example, if the pavement is wet, and you need to do a certain number of other adjustments. So this was interesting to me because it really offers a view into what dopamine or how dopamine might be influencing and driving how it might be influencing mobility resilience. And that is to influencing the level of connectivity and attention as it drives these processes. And in fact, when we ask individuals to walk at their usual pace, what we find is that individuals who walk faster do have greater connectivity in their brain. That's a health of the structure of the nerves that connects different regions in our brain. But it also, when we talk about connectivity, we also indicate the strength of the strength at which these areas are connected with each other. In other words, the way they talk to each other and how well they're connected with each other, which we call resting state connectivity. So let me give you an example to put all of this together and think about dancing. How many of you dance here? Maybe more should go dancing. I think it should be the next activity. When we begin learning how to dance, we learn the movement, and that is something that requires a lot of effort, and we're tentative, and that is difficult. So what is happening during that time is that we're really using a lot of our prefrontal lobes, so the part of the brain that is sitting pretty much above our eyes. As we learn the movement, the effort is reduced. What it means is, from a neurobiological perspective, means that the activation now moves posteriorly toward the back of your brain and deep down in your brain, so that it tends to become automatic. And then you dance beautifully. Now, walking is a little bit like dancing, in my opinion. You do all remember there was a time when walking was automatic. Right? I'm actually starting to forget the time when walking was automatic for me. I now need to pay attention. As our body changes, we need to constantly relearn how to adjust to new pains and new differences in our physical body. So this is, the slides are going on. And so this is really what we are trying to do, is to bring back people to the level of automaticity of walking, and walking that is effortless. So when we say that, when I tell you that we found that higher connectivity and higher levels of dopamine are related to greater motor control and mobility resilience, this is the kind of process I'm thinking about. It's a dynamic process that goes through a relearning to a reduction of effort to increase automaticity. And in this graph here, I show the results of an initial study where we restore dopaminergic levels in individuals who walk slowly in the absence of Parkinson's disease. I think by now, every time I say dopamine, probably you are thinking, do these people have Parkinson's disease? These individuals are free from neurological conditions. They walk slowly. They had lower levels of dopamine. We restored the levels of dopamine via pharmacological intervention. And we found after 3 weeks that their gait speed increased. And the higher the level of dopamine, the better and the faster their gait. We're now replicating these results with a full-blinded randomized clinical trial. This was an open-label study. So can we enhance mobility resilience? So because I told you that the brain is so important, enhancing mobility resilience means going through the brain. So what helps the brain? And luckily, we know a lot of the things that can influence brain health. In this was the Lancet Commission, where it tells you the various factors that can make your brain healthy. If you cannot see it, I can't see either. So I always tell my students, never have a small font. This is a small font. But so that there are several factors that I'm sure you already know. Some of these are control diabetes and control cholesterol and control lipids, take care of your physical health. There is a lot in here that has to do with physical activity. And the report to the right is the Canadian report from a couple of years ago that effectively has the same findings in terms of drivers of brain health. Physical activity was what I was most interested in. And the reason is, again, personal. There was no way I could convince my mother to go to the gym. It was just something that she would not like. So I talked with one of your colleagues, Teresa Liu Ambrose in Canada, for several years about how can we make physical activity and exercise effectively a medicine for everybody. So we started thinking, and that's how we had this research symposium in Vancouver a couple of years ago. And we thought that perhaps we should look at the muscle-brain crosstalk. Higher physical activity means we're moving more. It means our muscles are moving more. So perhaps we should look at how much those muscles need to move in order to have a neuroprotective effect. And so I want to tell you something about the muscle is a highly active endocrine organ. We don't think about that. They do a lot more than just allowing us to move. They constantly release factors in the circulation, hormones, inflammatory factors that are important for homeostasis of all organs. They're important for the health of our entire body, including the brain. These are some papers here on the right. One of these is actually from CLSA that have shown time and again that the health of your muscles is associated with the health of your brains. So it's kind of known, but the question is again, why? Why is there good? A lot of good things are associated with each other. So in a series of thematically related papers in the past few years, my research group has really honed into the skeletal muscle. The muscle, as it ages, is characterized by a decreased mass, increased adiposity, and reduced contractility. So this yellow in this figure is indicating adiposity, which causes inflammation and inflammatory response in the muscle cells, which are the good cells, the one that you want to have, the one in those in green. So we spent a lot of time across multiple epidemiological studies assessing the strength of the association between muscle adiposity and brain health, utilizing a number of cognitive tests and also neuroimaging. And we verified over and over that it was not, these associations not only were real, but they had nothing to do with whether you're a man or a woman, doesn't matter your ethnicity, and it also doesn't matter your age. We found these associations even in middle age, not only in adults older than 65. So convinced by the strength of this association, we then decided to look at the secretome. In other words, all those factors that the skeletal muscle release in the circulation. And we particularly focused on myostatin, which is an important factor that is actually being tested in some randomized clinical trial to promote muscle health. And we found that it had a strong association with brain health. So now we had the muscle, and we had the brain, and we had something that was releasing the circulation that could effectively work as a messenger. What I did learn over time during this work is not enough to have factors that circulate they're freely circulating in the blood, but they actually need to be encapsulated in something called exosomes, some little vessels that really effectively work as messengers. They're super packed with a number of molecules and proteins and DNA, and they travel in the circulation. They carry a message from the organ that has released it, and they can find the target organ. So some of the things that we actually found recently is that the signature of mobility resilience can also be found in the blood, and it is found inside these exosomes. Now, then, how do we fuel mobility resilience? How can we enhance it? I want to summarize it. The M3, again, move, make decisions, and make sure to stay motivated, because all of these behaviors are not simply the results of the brain working. The beauty of the brain is this like a sponge. It can constantly and continuously absorb. So you can actually teach the brain new things by endorsing new behaviors. Expose yourself to favorable environment, connection, diet, and health. And this is a great place. There's so many researchers who are doing this kind of studies. It's really exciting. And then lastly, something that we are really looking at is there is a role for restoring dopamine and restoring the muscle secretome. And we're exploring ways to do that. Pharmacological venues is clearly one option, but there must be other venues. And surely the muscle can be stimulated in a more natural way that allows the release of the secretome. And neuroprotective molecules. So in order to expand our studies of dopamine restoration and muscle secretome, we are adopting this neuroscience framework. You may have already seen this. There are, in this case, 14 pillars, so 14 major mechanisms that underlie the way our bodies age. And there is a relationship between the age of these in this mechanism, in this pathways, and a function. And I really enjoyed reading this recent consortium paper from Canada, emphasizing the importance of collaboration and education. We were talking about education earlier with Suzanne Labarge. Because it's clearly the only way to really bring together all these pathways is through multidisciplinary collaboration. Some of the discoveries from neuroscience and using this approach is the identification of certain genes that corresponds to changes in certain biological pathways, which then translate to aging. Neuroscience has really brought about a lot of excitement to the field of aging in the past 10, 15 years. I could have closed my talk here. However, when I received the invitation from Dr. Reina, I was reading about gerotranscendence, and I was reading about theories of aging. I was reading about a Canadian woman, in fact, Joan Erickson, who, with her husband, Erik Erikson, in the 60s and 70s, published the stages of life, 8 stages of life. Dr. Erickson died, and John then lived longer and published the 9th stage of life. And she had a completely different view on aging during that last decade. And that really got to me because I was thinking about the diagram I've just shown you. Seems linear, right? You got some genes, you got some disease, you're gonna die. However, by emphasizing this biological pathway, I think we risk thinking about aging as a disease itself. We're also measuring successful aging, perhaps, through the lens of middle age. The parameters of successful aging are the same as those of when we were 40 or 50s. We gotta move, we gotta go to the gym. We need to be super active. And of course, I do wanna do all these things. And I do want you to be able to do all these things. But aging must be more than just a rehashing of middle age, of what we had just done for the past 40 or 50 years. Aging should be bringing something more. And so as I was looking through the theory of aging, I found this interesting paper on indigenous ideas about health, where indigenous also included some of the tribes of this very land where we're staying in Ontario. And I don't know if you can read it, but at the center there is indigenous elderhood. And then there are 6 elements that are important for being an elder. Being recognized and respected for knowing, living, and teaching traditional knowledge is one of the things that really stuck with me. But also, elders are dedicated to transmitting wisdom to the next generation. They make ongoing contribution to community, provide a vision for the future grounded in tradition. And elderhood should not be related to age alone. Elders are care providers. In indigenous tradition, an elder could be anyone who makes that kind of, all of these contributions, regardless of their chronological age. So how do we do this? How do we maintain the excitement of neuroscience, the excitement of the new discoveries, while also being mindful of this way of thinking about aging? Well, we need to reframe. We need to do some reframing. So we're going to do it together through this exercise. How many of you look at this figure and they think this person is lonely? I always use this figure to show that this was an example of loneliness. But recently, I've been thinking, perhaps this person is looking at nature outside. Perhaps it has just snow. Perhaps it was in Hamilton, where it's cold and it's snowing and it's beautiful outside. Perhaps it's listening to poetry or is listening to music. So I don't have any answer, but all I'm thinking, and I would like to know your opinion about this, is there is more to aging than the kind of success that we are thinking about. And so just to wrap it up, I hope I've convinced you that mobility resilience has a brain signature, that we can fuel mobility resilience by harnessing brain remodeling, and it's important to integrate the theories of aging and population neuroscience. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Caterina, for that really thought-provoking and very clever presentation. So I'm Marla Beauchamp. I'm the director of the MIRA Dixon Hall Center and principal investigator of the MACM3 project. I think I recognize some of you from our open house last week, so thank you for coming out again. So now we're going to have a question and answer session with Caterina. We're going to have a couple of microphones circulating, and so if you have a question, please raise your hand and someone will come bring you a microphone. And just try and speak your question if you can as loudly as possible. Yes, and we will repeat the question. Me?
Thank you for the talk. You didn't talk on dementia, and I personally know many that were very, very physically active and very, very smart, and then developed dementia. How does that fit into this?
You want to repeat the
Okay,
question?
so the question is about dementia, and could we talk about the relationship between being physically active and developing dementia?
Yes, thank you. Actually, you remember that figure that I said I shouldn't show you this figure, the font is so small. The end point of that figure, thinking about all the factors that, that could influence brain health, it's actually dementia. And that is what we know a lot about the factors that can influence dementia, and physical activity is one of those. So dementia as a condition that is associated, for example, with loss of memory, right? It is being thought that physical activity could delay the progression of cognitive impairment, doesn't cure, not as a cure to dementia, which is such an advanced stage of neurodegeneration that would not be responding to physical activity the same way as if you started earlier in life. Now, what type of physical activity? You probably want to know how long and how short, how little as possible, because not everybody likes to do physical activity, right? Well, that's interesting that more recently we're starting to see that resistance training can have beneficial effects on brain health and starve the process that leads to, slow down the process that leads to dementia. Aerobic exercise also has beneficial effects, but it's not safe for everybody or enjoyable for everybody. So there is a very interesting line of work on resistance training.
Next question.
Can you hear me? That was terrific. Thank you so much. But as an aging person, I couldn't help but struggle with the confound in the work about how quickly you can walk on direction or on uneven surfaces. The whole notion of fear of falling wasn't really addressed. And you speak to anyone in their 70s and 80s, and what's affecting their speed of walking, at least in part, is the fear of falling. Having known someone who fell and really never got up properly. So I would appreciate if you could talk about that. And it could well be, too, that the fear is a reflection of a personality factor, a negativity or a positivity. Some people are whatever, and other people are just very cautious. So I'd appreciate if you could comment.
Thank you so much. The question is about fear of falling and what role it plays in influencing the speed at which we walk, right? And let's think about this for a moment. When you're fearful, what are you going to do? You're going to take your time, right? It's going to take time. It's going to take effort. It's going to require all of your attention. So it's not easy to measure fear, especially not with the tools, at least not with the tools we have now. That's why we measure attention. We can ask people about their fear of falling. And what we found was very interesting. And this was actually was work done by others as well, is that individuals with higher fear of falling were those with higher cognitive level. Because to recognize the limitations of your body in relationship to your environment, it does require intellectual capacities. And so fear of falling can be paralyzing. Of course, it can compromise the speed at which you walk. It can keep you home because you don't want to go out because you're afraid of falling. And there is that. On the other hand, it's important to think that you may want to recognize that fear is the result of a certain process of making a decision. And it shouldn't be just something to discard as something negative. What was the other question?
It was about personality.
Personality,
I was
yes.
triggered by the
Yes, there are traits,
dopamine
right?
connection as
Yes,
well.
there's some personal traits like cautiousness, for example, and anxiety. They all go. They also go together. What I like to point out is that it's not one way or the other. I mean, it's not only one way, I should say. It's not just fear is something bad, but it does carry with itself that you do want to think that it's a result of a thinking process whereby you have made a decision to adjust your walking, for example, by walking more slowly.
Thank you, Doctor, for this amazing presentation. Yeah, just in summary, can we say or advise our older adults, colleagues or friends, that in order to have active brain, just to keep the 3 M's, the moving, the making decision, and motivation. Do you think that this a small prescription is good for the seniors?
So the question is about the 3 M's, moving, motivation, and making decisions, and if that is something we would recommend to our peers, and maybe how we might put that into practice.
Thank you. You stated beautifully, indeed. That was exactly what I was hoping, you would get out of this lecture. Those are things you can do immediately, now. You can start from now. I mean, you don't have to go dancing if you really don't want to go dancing, and yet dancing does require a lot of making decisions and a lot of moving, and it does require the motivation. But it could be anything, right? And it is definitely something that you can do anytime.
Thank you. You have encouraged me to keep on with my fitness classes, so thank you for that. But I'm interested in the dopamine levels that you were talking about earlier. Is there a way of increasing dopamine levels without supplementation?
So the question, first of all, she mentioned that she has reason to continue with her fitness classes, so that's wonderful to hear. The question was about dopamine, and if there are ways to increase dopamine without requiring supplementation.
Yes, the 3M. I mean, it's a boost of energy, right? When people say, I feel energized, I went dancing, I talked to someone, I went for a walk, that feeling of energy, that's what it is, indeed.
Hi, thanks so much for your talk. I had a question similar about dopamine, and I wondered, right here, I wondered, was it the dopamine levels at baseline that were predictive of the walking speed? So it was like individual differences at baseline. And what might be causing that? I mean, I can understand what can increase it, but what's your idea about why do we start out with lower dopamine?
Right, thank you so much. Yeah, so the question is, I show you a little picture where I show you that individuals with lower dopamine exposed to dopaminergic supplementations for 3 weeks walked faster. And you astutely notice that I said it's the level of baseline dopamine. This is a very important point because it means that there are individuals who are hypodopaminergic, who walk around, don't have Parkinson's disease. I don't know that they will have Parkinson's disease. They don't have Parkinson's disease right now. And they are hypodopaminergic. And those would be the individuals who would benefit the most from dopamine restoration and supplementation. Now, in the 70s, there were several studies where older adults were participating in studies with dopamine supplementation. The side effects were really bad. Dopamine can make your cardiovascular system crash. And you don't see much more from the 70s until the mid-2000, when we could study better the levels of dopamine, endogenous dopamine that the individuals had. So my point is you really need to titrate the exposure to such dopamine supplementation. Not everybody can take it because we all have different levels of dopamine. So now the question that you just asked is, why is it that some people have higher or lower? Is it a disease? Is it they don't have Parkinson's, remember? Well, it's not clear. But however, there have been some studies showing that the epigenetic plays a role. So it's not quite a genetic predisposition, but it's similar to a genetic predisposition that drives variable levels of dopamine. And there has been actually another study with older adults, also hypodopaminergic and slow gait, who had frailty, and they were the ones who benefit the most from dopaminergic exposure in that RCT. Thank you for asking that.
One in the back here. I work with a lot of seniors, and I get the same questions over and over. They want to exercise, but they're afraid to exercise by themselves, whether they fall over or they have a heart condition or lung or whatever the case may be. They feel better exercising with someone. And when I went to the McMaster study, having a medical personnel there made all the difference in the world for a whole bunch of people. Is McMaster working on more of that?
Okay, well, maybe I can take that one. Thank you, but maybe I'll let you just comment first about, I think the question was about exercising when you have a lot of different medical conditions and people maybe being afraid to do that without medical supervision. And does McMaster have resources to do that? And so we certainly have. We have sitting right here, the director of our physical, of PACE, which is the Physical Activity Center of Excellence at McMaster, where you can go and exercise with supervision. So that is a wonderful resource here at McMaster. And, you know, I will just maybe just add, just as a, you know, from physiotherapy kind of background, that, you know, even doing a little bit of movement is better than nothing at all. Starting small, and, you know, any level of chronic condition, you know, you can start doing some of those 3 M's that Dr. Rosano shared with us today.
I completely agree. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Very stimulating talk. So my question is going to seem a little strange, but I have operational interest in it. And it has to do with owning a dog. I don't own a dog. Is there any research, or is there a way to factor out the physiological benefits of owning and walking a dog from the other ones, which are psychological and otherwise? Because I'm interested in elders walking dogs, the idea being if it's a big dog, it needs a big walk.
So the question was about dog walking and about owning, you know, trying to separate out owning a dog, the benefits of walking and some of those physiologic benefits to maybe some of the psychosocial benefits that you get from dog ownership.
It seems like you already answered the question. There is no study that I know of comparing walking versus walking a dog. I would, if I were to try an explanation, but here I'm no expert, I'm talking like a dog owner myself, a former dog owner actually, is in addition to the benefit of the walking itself, there is the caring. And I think caring for another living being is definitely, that has been shown to be a predictor of longevity. The so-called blue zones, for example, that I'm sure you all have, I see people nodding here, so I'm sure you know about, when the researchers went to see what were the factors that made those blue zones different from the other areas, one of the factors was caring for someone else. And so I think that could probably, but it would be a great study. Maybe we should talk about it.
I got a question here. Sorry. Thank you for your talk. I just had a quick question about dopamine. You mentioned like higher dopamines means higher gait speed. Were there participants taken into account that were on antidepressants? And if they were on antidepressants, they got a higher level of dopamine? Did you see any changes with baseline who were on antidepressants and people who already had a higher dopamine level? Like, did you see any difference in gait speed in those participants?
So the question is about the relationship between gait speed and higher dopamine, and if you were able to account for antidepressants. Was there any effect of being on antidepressants?
That is a very good question, and I think you're thinking about the fact that antidepressants could have dopaminergic pathways. In fact, some antidepressants are dopaminergic in nature. Remember, one of those 3M is motivation, which is declines with depression. We did account for medications, yes, precisely for that reason. Thank you.
Got one here.
Thank you for a very great talk. I'm just wondering whether BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is required for healthy neurons and regrowth of neurons, and has been shown by mind-body exercises such as Tai Chi and possibly yoga to stimulate BDNF, whether BDNF has any role in determining the level of dopamine.
Do you study dopamine? You know, I don't know the answer to that question. I do know that there is a link between BDNF and dopaminergic transmission, and I don't know the answer to that question. We did not study BDNF yet. We wanted to, in the study of muscle and brain connection, we really wanted to look at factors that we knew would come from the muscle. For example, myostatin comes from the muscle, and so we focused on that. BDNF can come from multiple sources, including the brain and the muscle, right, and other organs. So, do you know the answer to this question you asked me?
No, I'm still waiting for. I'm still waiting for a paper to be published or somebody doing something about that. Whether there's any connection.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This isn't about dogs, it's about cats.
Okay.
And I had dogs up until my 70s, and it was good to walk them, and that was good exercise. But then when I was in my 70s, I thought, you know what? I think I'm going to get a cat. And I wasn't a cat person, but I am now. But my motivation to move is the kitty litter is really heavy, and you have to lean over to the litter box. So that is my motivation. So cats and dogs are good for all of us.
Spectacular. Thank you.
So for those at the back who didn't hear, I think it was just a comment about getting a cat can even be good to increase the motivation to move and to change the litter and take care of the cat. And I think Dr. Rosano agrees.
Yep. I may cite you in one of my talks if you don't mind.
Okay, so I have a question. I'm very interested in how close all you researchers are with all your fascinating research to be able to give us targets. So, for example, we're hearing 7,000 steps is probably a good target to hit if we can do that on an average daily. I'm wondering, with resistance training, is it 3 times a week, 20 minutes, and where I'm straining the muscles and I feel it the next day? What are our targets to aim for? I'm motivated, I just don't know what to do.
So the question is about targets. We're hearing things like we need to walk 7,000 steps to decrease our risk, and in terms of resistance training, how often and what kinds of resistance training do we need to do? People are very motivated to do this kind of exercise, but they're not sure what to do.
Yes, so as Dr. Bouchamp said earlier, as anything matters, every step matters. And it's true that there are studies that show certain threshold, and I don't disagree with those at all. But I also don't think those thresholds should discourage people to do anything unless it meets that threshold. I don't know that there is a specific prescription for everybody with regard to resistance training. Earlier I was talking with the physical therapist. I don't remember, but I do work with PTs myself a lot, and also in my personal life also, actually, not just at work. And what I'm learning is that this has to be a personalized, there has to be a personalized plan.
There are I might just add, there's the Canadian 24-hour movement guidelines, and if you look up the website, it gives really specific information about kinds of targets that we want to be achieving, and in there can give examples of sort of the muscle strengthening exercises that you might want to do 2 to 3 times a week, along with balance exercises, and then of course moving as often as possible and trying to move at a pace that is brisk, so that you can move, you can still talk, but you couldn't sing. So if you check out those Canadian 24-hour movement guidelines, you might see some more specific information.
Got a question here. Do you want to go first, Audrey?
Oh, is it ready? Okay. Hi, another question. Sleep. Is there any relationship between sleep and the 3 M's? As you get older, getting an uninterrupted night's sleep is very difficult, and I just wanted to know if they factored that in with the 3 M's, if it had any,
So the question is about sleep, and how do we factor in sleep when we think about the 3 M's?
3
The
M's.
3
How
M's.
does the sleep goes with the 3 M's? We could add an S. Sleep is it's an under-recognized risk factor for brain health, I think. I mean, in the past probably decade or so, there have been a lot more studies showing the importance of sleep. And in the symposium that we did in Vancouver with our colleagues and actually Dr. Fannestock here from this university also participated, we did talk about sleep and the effect that it has on multiple organs. Lack of sleep, for example, remember in that symposium we were interested in muscle health. How sleep or lack of sleep also influences muscle health and vice versa. And it's not that, at first it may seem, where is the link? Well, in order to sleep, you need to reach a deep level of relaxation, right? At the skeletal muscle level as well. So the fact that a lack of sleep would disrupt muscle health in addition to disrupting brain health is not that difficult to believe. I think lack of sleep influences making decisions, right? And it certainly influences motivation, and it has been associated with a greater risk of fall. I think it's because it compromises brain health, and that in turn compromises motor coordination. That could be one way to explain it.
Question over here.
Yes, this is again about dopamine levels. So many older people are on various heart drugs, cholesterol drugs, blood pressure drugs, maybe anti-seizure drugs. Is there been any studies into looking at how that affects dopamine levels?
Okay, so the question is again about dopamine and about some of the medications that can affect dopamine, such as cholesterol-lowering medications, heart medications, I didn't hear the third one. Anti-seizure. Anti-seizure medications, thank you.
Interesting. Many of the medications you cited seemingly are not related with the brain, but the anti-seizure obviously would be related with brain health. So I don't know of any study that has looked at older adults without Parkinson's disease and did a PET study to assess dopamine in relationship to their medications. I could look at them actually because in our study we have a sample size large enough. The truth is that individuals who tend to participate in our studies with all this neuroimaging tend to be on the healthier side. They would not be, if they were taking anti-seizure medications, would not be eligible, for example, for this study. So, but I could certainly look at some of the other medications. So thank you for giving me that idea.
Right here. How about now?
Perfect. Thank you. Dr. Rosano, thank you so much for that talk. My question has to do with the last image that you showed, which was about the man staring out the window and how we can't assume what he's thinking or what he's doing. And what that signals to me is that researchers can't determine the inner thoughts of any participant and probably need more qualitative research to really know a full picture of a person's life. So my question for you is whether you have plans to integrate more qualitative methodology into your work, and then how you think that'll shift the knowledge base that we have for brain health going forward.
Thank you so much. Do you want to repeat it for everybody else?
Sure. So the question was about thinking back to the man staring out the window, and that it's really difficult for us to be able to make assumptions about what people are really feeling and thinking. And so the question is about incorporating qualitative research into some of our approaches to better understand what people's perceptions really are?
So I would probably need to talk to you to know how to do that. I literally have just started thinking about it, and I am not happy about the fact that I had not thought about this before. I'm so entrenched and enamored with the biology and the mechanism and all this beautiful neuroimaging, those beautiful pictures, that I had really not had the chance to stop and think about what aging, really is about. And we were talking about that earlier with the other trainees. Nobody tells us how to age. We just don't know. We just don't know what it feels like. And as we approach it, it seems a little too late to understand what it is like. So I think we could ask, for sure, about the perception of aging, and there are some studies on gerotranscendence. Surprisingly few in the United States. I haven't looked at other countries, but very, very few, because that was my first thought. Maybe I could talk to others and see how they do it. Perhaps someone in Canada, maybe the CLSA is thinking about doing something like this, but it is definitely something I want to keep thinking about.
So I'm also going to ask questions related to the last slide. We wrote a short commentary in Journal of Gerontology a few years ago, which was, is biology ageist? Because there was an assumption in that photo that person looking in the window standing alone must be lonely. Whether they are lonely or not, but that is an assumption in society we make, that older person must be alone and lonely. So how much of this stage of aging reflected through the social lens of ageism than actually the issue of loneliness?
If you repeat that question, it gives me time to think about the answer.
Okay, sure. So the question is about, again, back to the man looking out the window, and the question is, Dr. Rina had published a paper a while ago that asked the question, is biology inherently ageist? And so, to comment on, what you think about that question.
Yeah, I do need more time to think about this. I really do. I really do. I don't know. I really don't know. The pull toward those, the figure right before the man staring outside, looking outside the window, had those, you may recall it, had genes, and that it has all these pathways, crossing and then landing onto certain pathologies. It's just so fascinating, the idea that you can understand how the body works and then change it, and then perhaps reverse aging. And I do want that. And I'm sure many of you want that. But again, I'm also thinking aging must be more than just this going back to the way we were when we were young. But I also understand the question is about the biology. I don't know.
The question is more than biology. Is it a socially constructed view? Is it a socially constructed view of aging that pushes us to think this person is lonely? Because that's our interpretation, what this person is looking at. The reason I was asking, I've been reading a recent book which is based on aging through the Western lens versus the Eastern lens. Mm-hmm. Question is, do we really need to worry about loneliness? Mm-hmm. Or is this something socially constructed mm-hmm. construct that is prevalent in Western cultures, that we have to have engagement? So it also brings another lens to thinking about what aging is in relation to what philosophical view we bring to the table. And so I was trying to get that into
the quote I sent to you when you invited me, you can recall, it was straight from Joan Erickson, who, by the way, if you Google Joan, you won't find her, because it's the work of her husband that became famous, except for this 9th stage of life. So, but Joan said, right in her 9th decade, she said, there must be something profoundly wrong with our society if this is what when we talk about aging, this is how we see it. which is this successful aging and this quest for longevity and eternal youth, right? So there must be something. So going to traditional views of aging, indigenous Asia, does have value, I think. But I don't know how to do it yet. We should talk, yes.
Just a follow-up comment to that. I want to congratulate you for actually stimulating the audience to think of what goals and criteria and how many steps we should do to set that standard scientifically, but also your openness to the fact that aging is not on those numbers, actually. That it's very much about what are the goals that one could set to maximize potential as you're getting older, ideally, somewhat healthily, but even if not, what makes quality of life in those years? You raised that right at the beginning, and it's a good closure that you're raising it at the end, but I want to congratulate you with your scientific mind to be so open to new ways of thinking.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
There's a question here.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much for the presentation. That's very informative. My question is about the, actually, for women, postmenopausal, pre-senior years, as I'm just noticing that a number of women that are in my circles are moving to questions about ADHD, which of course they're also experimenting with antidepressants, and both of those being linked to dopamine. Just wondering, are there any studies out there that's dealing with that population?
I didn't catch all of it, but I think the question is about postmenopausal women
and also about studies about ADHD, right?
Yeah, the use of medications. I'm just seeing more diagnosis of people going to their doctors in that age category, wondering about ADHD, wondering about whether they need SNRIs.
Okay.
There's a link there with studies around dopamine.
Okay, so the question is because now with this age group there's more diagnosis for ADHD and also getting medication for it, and if that has a link to the work that you're doing.
I'm sorry, I did not hear.
Here, okay, so there's more, the question is about women's health and women, after menopause or going through menopause, and more women are becoming diagnosed with ADHD, for example, and might be put on medication for ADHD or medication like antidepressants. And are you aware of any link to sort of dopamine and your research?
So this is a great point, and I think menopause and brain health has come to the forefront only recently. I really like your question. It took 3 people to repeat it, but I think I got it. Thank you. Menopause was, a subject of stigma, right? Actually, 10 years ago, when I started thinking about resilience, I interviewed my female colleagues who were in their late 60s. I wanted to ask them how it was to go through menopause. Can you imagine a female researcher going through menopause while she's writing a big grant? Well, nobody wanted to talk about it, because there is a big stigma. And I think now we're finally working our way through that. But we don't know a lot yet. So this ADHD, I actually was not aware of greater diagnosis of ADHD after menopause. I was not aware. Certainly depression, and certainly what people call brain fog, changes in attention, changes in how quickly you process, information, so processing speed, all those that are in those 3 regions. And it is related to motivation, it's related to making decisions, and it's also related to moving, and so moving more can actually influence the other two areas. I don't know of any study that has specifically looked at dopamine. I would not be surprised if there will be a dysregulation of the dopaminergic system. I also don't want you to think that everything has to do with dopamine the way I do. I do think it, but it's not, right? It's one neurotransmitter. We chose it because because it's so important for this domain and for mobility. It's a master regulator it's a neuromodulator of mobility and decision making, but it's not the only one neurotransmitter. There are obviously many others and many more. So I think it would be safer. I think I would be comfortable saying that certainly with menopause, there are changes in the brain morphology, in the brain vascularization, and brain function. And HRT, hormone replacement therapy, is now being studied for its neuroprotective effects in the short term. But I'll stop here.
Yes.
So I think we'll take this as the last question. Thank you.
Okay. The question I have, it's actually probably more of a statement than a question. I was a business person and was very busy, very active. When I retired, I found it very interesting how young people would respond to me. It made me think of about how Native people respected their elders, how that would be at once upon a time, how socially older people were looked at. Well, I don't think that that's the case today. It's been my experience that it isn't. That, as an example, two of my neighbors who would have been in their mid-20s were discussing yoga in great depth. Well, I used to do yoga. I was very good at it. Do you think I could break into that conversation? No way. They looked at me as if, what did I have to offer to that conversation? And I think self-esteem can get easily eroded by incidences just like that, especially if you're not used to it at all. And I don't think who should be used to it. You know, you come up, you have some self-respect, you think, you've got an opinion about this or that or whatever, and all of a sudden you're disregarded simply because you have gray hair and wrinkles. It's like your input isn't valued. So if you're motivated, you move beyond that and you find some other way to find your self-esteem, whether it's through an organization like PACE, which McMaster has, other types of things like this event here today. But I think that if you lose your self-esteem and your sense of purpose, I think that affects all of the things that you were discussing today. Anyway, thank you very much. It was a very interesting talk.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I'll repeat the gist of the comment. I think it's more of a comment.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So thank you very much for your comment.
I know we are pressed for time, but I just wanted to point out this specific comment. If this doesn't work, I find another way. If you only knew how much is happening in the brain when you do I find the other way. If you only knew the rewiring and the plasticity and the remodeling and all that is happening as you, first of all, understand that you cannot do that way. Now you need to do a different way, and it's completely new, and you need to strategize, and you need to have a plan, you need to make decisions, you need to implement the plan. If we only knew how many difficult things we do every single day, even now we're trying to understand my accent, for example, how difficult, and just for that, you have grown smarter. Thank you. Wow, thanks so much. Oh my God.
So, you know what? That was a great discussion. I really want to thank Dr. Rosano again. I think she's challenged us all to think about how we can reframe aging, and also I'm going to think more about the 3M for sure, because we actually have a study here called MAC-M3. So I'm thinking that that's quite significant that we named it that. So thank you very, very much. So I would now I just want to do a couple things. So one is to remind you that at the back, there's a registration table that has information about programs here at McMaster, information about our Labarge Optimal Aging Portal, Voice Canada, a platform that you can sign up to learn about research studies here at McMaster. So please go check out the registration table. And now, before we end today, I would really like to invite up Suzanne Labarge, who is the reason we are here today and is a huge support of aging research at McMaster. And this is one of the reasons we were able to offer this lectureship. So I'd like to welcome Suzanne to say a few words. Thank you.
Well, first of all, welcome everybody. I'm delighted to see so many people here. And thank you very much, Parminder and Caterina, for putting this on. But I just want to say something, because when I went back, when we first started doing research in aging, and I got involved in it about 20 years ago, what's delightful is to see that here's a group of academics who wanted to actually share their information with the people they're working with. I've seen it with the Dixon Hall MIRA Dixon Hall project, where the professors have been down talking to these people who are basically, they're not university graduates, but being able to interact with them, to share their knowledge, to answer their questions. And I think that's so rare out of a university, and it's just delightful to see it being done so well. So I just really, being part of this is just actually, extremely positive for me. When you talk about what you do in old age and your retirement, I got to tell you, this is a good way of going about it. But I really just do so much want to thank Parminder and Caterina for today, because I think they've shared their knowledge in a way that most of us enormously appreciate. And thank you all for coming.
Okay, thanks everyone. That concludes our event today. Again, check out the registration desk and the whiteboard also, where you can leave comments. Okay, leave comments about what you're excited about, what you heard today, anything about aging that you think is important. Please have your voice heard. Thank you very much.